Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the RedWhoop Ion. This is the ZeroGrav edition from R3d Shifters. If you're familiar with the channel, you might remember the ZeroGrav review I did of this particular printed frame. Yes, this is printed. This is a special filament print. I don't know exactly the makeup of it. I can't tell you about it, but let's go through the specs at which I built it. I used 1102 13,500 kV motors, HQ 65mm push-on props. I used the Crazy Bee board that comes in the Mobula 6, which features the ESC, flight controller, receiver, and VTX all on one board, and the Runcam Nano 3 with the original lens. I forgot to weigh the frame before I got to building it. All built up, it weighs just under 27 grams. I flew it on all three of these 1S batteries, but the flight footage you're going to see is on this 450 milliamp battery, which brings the weight up to 39.5 grams. With the 300 milliamp battery, which gets you about 2 minutes of flying, it weighs 34.5 grams. With the 350 milliamp battery, which gets you about 2.5 minutes of flying, it weighs almost 35.5 grams. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting about 102 millimeters. So this thing is very quiet, it's very discreet. So unfortunately, because we can't hear it so much, we're going to listen to my neighborhood quite a bit. We've got roofing going on across the house, we've got nature, birds chirping in the trees, you may even hear some leaves rustling. We get off to a little bit of a rough start by clipping that branch, but we're gonna have plenty of time to talk here because on a 450 milliamp battery, I get almost 5 minutes of fly time on this particular flight. I did have some flights that came in closer to the 440 mark or even a little bit less. It really depends upon that last little bit and where you land. You can squeeze out a little extra fly time if your priority is fly time, or if your priority is landing your battery at a certain spot, then you can also do that, and you get over 4 minutes of flight time just about regardless of what you do when it comes down to using that 450 milliamp battery. As I said, you can fly this with your traditional, Whoop stick batteries that you make sure your lead's the appropriate length. I couldn't use my nitro nectars because the lead isn't long enough. But if you have a 300 milliamp 1S battery that has a little bit of a lead on it, you get about 2 minutes of flying in this configuration. And then, like I said, with the 350, you get about 2.5 minutes of flying. It varies a little bit, and I used all those batteries. And one of the things that I really like about this is I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but you kind of feel like a butterfly or a hummingbird that you can make any turn, you can go anywhere, you're small, you're low profile, you don't have too many concerns. I'll show you a crash reel as a picture-in-picture as we get back to the desk. I crashed it a bunch of times. My damage came down to motors. My original motors, unfortunately, they were 1mm shaft motors, so I had a crash on the concrete. Actually, it was really early on. I was putzing around while my son was working on the mowing and trimming, and I bent a shaft, and I flew it that way for a while, and I kind of thought about just flying it that way, but that night when I got back to the desk, I decided to try again to straighten a 1mm shaft, and I snapped another one. I don't know how you guys do it that are able to straighten those bent 1mm shafts, but I got a knack for breaking them, not straightening them. So I had to go back out, buy some more motors. You may have noticed the motors have a little bit of a different color. Those are still Happy Model motors. I just think Happy Model is changing how they're painting their motors a little bit. I compared the bells. The bell design, as far as the structure goes, they're the same. It's just the paint scheme, and I do like the paint scheme. It looks more attractive. So this is very light. It's very quiet. As I said, it's very discreet. It's one of those things that I think many of you would probably enjoy just flying around in front of your house, your apartment, maybe outside of work. Wherever you are, you're probably not going to bother anybody, and if anybody were to give you the fits and you fly it in and you show it to them, they'd probably look at you like you got three heads and wondering why you're playing with toys, but they won't feel threatened by it, so that's a good thing for many of you. And it's just a lot of fun. It's not huge, it's not real powerful. You notice my punch outs are fairly muted. I'm not going up over the house because it is so light, and in my area we have a fair bit of wind, and especially when I get up above house height, if I don't weigh at least 80 grams, it's going to mess with me a little bit. So I kept it fairly low to the ground, and I really enjoyed this quite a bit. This was one, I'm going to keep this one around, and I really like it because if I only had, like, say I'm working on a Whoop type battery or a Whoop type quad review, that if I had some batteries left over and the weather's nice, I can pop outside, grab this thing, and I can fly any of those 1S batteries that I might have charged. And 1S batteries are pretty inexpensive for the most part, and so most people can afford them. And then we've got the components that I used. You don't have to use those. You can go for a 2S version if you want. You should look on their website. They have a couple of different camera mounts if you want to use a different style of camera. Most of the board cameras or CMOS cameras, they'll fit into the mount that I have of the ZeroGrav edition. If you're wanting to fly a camera with a larger lens, a little bit more of a nose, they have camera mounts for those as well. If you want to go 2S, they have battery mounts for those as well, so you can build this up in many different configurations. Of course, when it comes to the durability, I can only vouch for how I built mine. But I haven't had any problems with their prints. Every time I've gotten one of these, I guess it's only been twice. I've got another one sitting here yet, but that will be coming up in the coming weeks. I haven't had any problems with the print, and I think that's one of the things that's going to be really important to show you is the crash reel, because when you think 3D printed frames, you oftentimes think fragile, and it's just not the case with whatever they're doing to print this, whether it's the filament magic or the printer magic. They seem to have it down to where it just works. Also on the tune, before the flight wraps up, I should mention I am running EMU Flight, and I am running, I believe, Connor Skylon's tune in EMU Flight. It's the 1S tune, and I'll put that on screen when we get back to the desk. He needs to get credit for that. And EMU Flight, some of you might not be familiar. I don't encourage you to use it if you're not comfortable flashing Betaflight and setting it up, but I need to disclose that I am using EMU Flight on this particular quad. So I ran my battery down just a little bit in that flight. So the first flight I want to show you up here is the one where I think I crashed 2 times, and I had grabbed this because I kind of monitor my son when he's doing the yard work. He is really bad at noticing what he misses, so that's something he has to learn, and he gets really frustrated by when I pick out all the different stuff that he is, the little bits of grass that he hasn't cut. You know, I can see it from a distance, but he doesn't seem to have that detail in his vision to where he can see where the grass is uneven. So I don't necessarily monitor and watch him, but I'm kind of in the area, so I kind of walk by where he was, and then I point out the things he missed. Drives him absolutely nuts. But it was a really fun flight, and even though I bent a motor that resulted in the shaft being broken by me later trying to straighten it, it was just a fun flight. I was just kind of cruising around. Of course, it wasn't something I can necessarily use in a review because of all the noise, but I wanted to show it to you because I feel like there's a sense of when you're flying this thing that you're not afraid of being around people, you're not afraid of crashing, you're not afraid of getting tangled up. It's just as though you feel like you can go anywhere and do anything, that you don't have a concern, because I think there's something in the back of at least my mind that knows how light it is and how low profile it is, and knowing it's running a 1S battery, it kind of just gives you a different sense of FPV feeling. I hopefully I can have described that into a way that's relatable. But what I would encourage you to do, if you're at all interested in having something like this you could put in your lunchbox, is to go over to the R3dshifters.com website. I'll put a link down in the video description and check out their frames. I'll link directly to the ZeroGrav edition, the Ion that I have here, but they have a whole host of different frames and different configurations that you can build like you want to build it. This was how I chose to build it. You may want something different, as I discussed in the flight video. We also talked about these motors a little bit. These are the original motors that I broke. Where's the... Yeah, let's get the broken shaft one out. See that poor guy right there? You can't... Oh, camera, focus. Yeah, so that's the one I tried to straighten after it got bent. And it really wasn't that bad bent. I should have just left it. But it did cause the props to be a little bit more viewable. That's something that you might want to take note of, is that the props, you know, even though they're overhead and you've got the camera angled up at them, they really weren't in the view all that much. I really didn't notice them when I was flying, and as I started watching back all my footage, I could kind of make it out because I'm looking for it. Something else that I noticed, that if you get the props that aren't clear, you know, they're full black, they're even less noticeable in the camera view, at least with this particular camera. So that's something to consider on your prop choice as well. But you see the difference in the bells. They're cut the same. To my eye, it's just a different paint scheme, a more detailed paint scheme. You may like that, you may not. Oh, I've got some dirt or something in there. Anywho, but after that flight that I have with my son out doing his yard work, I'll roll a crash reel so you can get some sort of feeling for the durability, for the crashes I had and how it survived. I do think there's a couple of things I should do to this long term, and that is mainly to secure these motor wires. I would take a little bit of my Emax tape and just kind of tape them to one of the arms just to secure them down a little bit so they don't get tangled up. I did have a crash where the camera became disconnected. It didn't just come It didn't come disconnected from the quad. It actually just came disconnected from the connector. It slid out a little bit, so I pushed that back in and video came back out. I do think I should have ran this antenna through that open slot, because in some of my crashes I forgot to check my antenna, and then when I hit arm and air mode kicked on, I could hear that little tick 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 tick, because it was just grazing my antenna. Can we see it anywhere? I don't know if we're going to be able to see any markings from the prop. I've got dirt in my camera area too. As far as putting this camera on, I use a pair of tweezers to kind of pull and stretch this stuff. It's very pliable. It holds the camera in really well. And again, if you're not using this camera and you need a larger hole, they have different camera mounts for different style of cameras that you can get. Also, they have different battery trays that you can get and put in here. So if you wanted to run 2S, you wouldn't have to stuff 2 batteries in here. I did toilet tank all my batteries, and it is a little bit of a stretch getting a 450 in there. I don't know if I can do it on camera because I kind of use my stomach as leverage, but actually I would go this way. There we go, I got it. Got it started at least. There we go. So I would toilet take my batteries. Actually, I didn't put it in there quite right. I would usually have the lead back here, and then I would connect it up, and that's how I would fly it. I like toilet tanking my battery when I can. There's just something about the flight difference that I do enjoy. But you can go the long ways if you want to, but be certain you understand that you're having crashes and that it's going to be bunking into your camera, because it is mounted right down there in profile with your camera. As an example, the nitro nectar batteries, which I did want to run with this. My understanding they were having a sale. Hopefully you got some during the sale. My lead just isn't long enough. There's just not enough there to get a bite on the battery. I even tried bringing the lead up over the top, and I just couldn't. So I'd have to lengthen the lead. So instead of doing that, I decided to use batteries with leads already on them. Once I got my new motors on here, the ones that you're currently looking at, I just stuffed on these HQ props, and I never changed out the props. They might be a little bit bent up and banged up, but I thought it still flew great. I still enjoyed myself. I didn't think it was extra in the picture when the props got banged up, or at least as banged up as they currently are. I would just continue to fly it like it is. And I think if you like flying whoops, if you like flying things that are prop protected, something like this, you would like flying something like this. I find it very comparative as far as the feeling you get. But this is just faster and more agile, and it flies in a wind or a breeze a little bit better. Of course, if you fly in an open field and you have heavy winds, say 10 plus miles an hour, you're going to notice it on this. So you'd have to possibly modify how you fly in order to, kind of hide from the wind, so to speak. Less so than if you were flying something like this. This you'd have to really hide from the wind if you're trying to fly in a 10-mile-an-hour wind. This cuts through the wind way better than any whoop does. And it also has that sense of safety. You're flying 1S. It's very, very light. It's quiet. It's just a good time. I don't know. I really enjoy this. This spoke to me. Let's talk a little bit about the build. So I need to go over that a little bit. This one's a little bit easier to build than you might think. We have screws that come down through the top right here. And this comes with everything as far as the frame goes. It comes with all these screws. You don't have to go find extra screws or anything. So that has these screws that kind of secures this bottom piece to it. And I did find that there was a couple of times when I was putting in this motor that I had to unscrew that screw in order to be able to lift it up. There's something about these boards where these motors aren't in exactly the same position, all of them. You make a completely uniform frame, but yet one motor is always wedged underneath something. Every time I've done something like this, it's been like that. You may have seen my last review where I modified a Mobula 6, the Mobula 6 HD, into a 75mm frame, and I had to bow all the motor connectors out in order to be able to get them in there without doing something crazy like cutting off the wires and soldering them directly on. So this is the one that I had to unscrew that screw on in order to get the motor connected down there. And then you've got this top canopy mount. There are grommets in all the mount points for the board, so you don't have to worry about providing those. It comes already mounted up. It actually comes kind of in an envelope just like this without the electronic components. We've got a screw here with a nut on the other side that can hold your camera. They do suggest that you glue your camera in to keep its position. I didn't get that fussed about it. I just kind of eyeballed my camera, set it down, and went for a fun fly. I've glued cameras in place before, and eventually they come loose anyways, and I didn't want to have to fuss with re-gluing it every time before I went out, and I found it held the camera steady. I did find that when I crashed, sometimes my camera would get a little sideways or something like that, and I had to readjust it, and I would just eyeball it up, set it back down, go have some more fun. Hopefully you've seen that fun flight, you've seen all sorts of crash footage, and you've maybe already headed over to the R3d Shifters website and checked out this particular frame. This again is the Ion, the ZeroGrav edition. They have several other editions of this one, as well as several other frames. Check them out. They can be hard to come by, so if you have any inkling that you want to, you should probably get to moving, because once stock gets down, it takes time to print these things. My understanding from a few of the past reviews I've done on these frames is that it is a very technical and difficult and hard on the printer sort of printing that they're doing. So if they run out of inventory, it might be a while before you're able to get one. So get your order in if you're interested. And if you do have any other comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.